Ah, the ghost. Okay, so, in the first place, it's always nice to get a client from a business card you left at a diner. It means people pick those things up. However, when leaving business cards at diners in certain areas of town, I should expect some issues. This call came through on a dreary December day as I was sipping coffee and watching the snow fall. The caller ID read that it was the local hospital, and as I picked up, I spoke to a rather frantic young man who informed me he was being held against his will and he needed an attorney to help him. When I asked where he was, he simply said, "The 5th floor." While this may sound innocuous, every hospital has a 5th floor, where Napoleon roams the halls freely, and the residents speak to their imaginary friends who may, or may not, have been an influencing factor in why they decided that clothing was a way for the government to track them, and therefore the only solution was to create poop pants to throw off the monitoring ability of the CIA. Long story short on this portion, within an hour of the call, a friend had dropped off my fee, and I was en route to the 5th floor to meet with my new client. I assumed it would be an involuntary committal defense, and after speaking with my client, I gauged that, while the man was most definitely in need of mental care, he was not a danger to himself or others, and was unlikely to be one. He had, in my opinion, been forced to agree to being committed by his probation officer, and frankly, I wasn't going to let that stand. I got the name of some contacts from his treatment plan who were willing to vouch that he had, until recently, been compliant with his medications, and contacted his social worker who was able to confirm that, yes, since he had ceased taking the medication due to an inability to afford the medications, the county would assist him with it. A slam dunk. I would simply swing my big lawyer dick around the mental ward and get him released, then appear in the court to defend against the involuntary committal. Within 24 hours of being committed, my client was back at home. A hearing was set a couple weeks in the future, and I did daily checks to be certain he was compliant with his medication leading up to the hearing, until the one day I didn't. A call from the local police was my tip-off. An older officer, one I was familiar with, called to advise they had responded to a disturbance at my client's home. He apparently had been screaming in an empty room loud enough that the neighbors were concerned and called the police. The police officer, a friendly sort, gauged the situation and decided my client wasn't a threat, but asked what the situation was. "The ghost," my client had responded. "The ghost won't get out and it won't leave me alone." "Well," said the officer, "I can tell it to leave." So he did. He told the ghost to leave. And then, apparently for shits and giggles, told him that it was a civil matter if the ghost refused to leave, and therefore an attorney would need to be contacted, at which point my client dropped my name, which resulted in the cop giving me a heads up. So I call my client, who is inconsolable at the concept of sharing his home with the ghost. Keep in mind, I've been to this guy's house. This is the first I've heard of a ghost. But there is a competency hearing on the horizon, and this will not play well in front of the judge. The cop said it's a civil matter, my client repeated about the 18th time after I told him I was not in fact a priest, but was a lawyer, and didn't know how to perform an exorcism. "What do you want me to do?" I snapped a bit. "Evict it?" There are moments in time when you should keep your mouth shut. This is one of them, because the immediate response was, "Can you? That'd be great." Well, shit. So, long story short, I ended up driving out there with a mock-up notice to quit, addressed to any spirits in possession of the property located at 1313 Mockingbird Lane without any authority under color of law, advising them that their possession was unlawful in nature, and ordering them to quit and surrender the premises, or any portion thereof, within 15 days of the date of this notice. As I was obviously unable to obtain personal service via hand delivery, I had my client direct me to the portion of the premises the ghost occupied, an empty spare bedroom, and made service by posting the notice to the door of the room. I then announced that the ghost had been served a valid notice to quit and surrender possession, and went home. A week later, as we're preparing to enter the court for my client's competency hearing, I ask about the status. "Oh, Mr. Creepy, it worked great," my client announced. "He moved out the same night and took all his stuff with him." The ghost apparently had stuff. Anyhow, I smiled and patted my client on the shoulder as I offered some sage advice. "Well, good," I said. "Now, let's not mention this in front of the judge. He might have a problem with the service and order us to let the ghost back in if he finds out about it." My client nodded enthusiastically. I kept him out of the mental hospital that day, and take some comfort knowing somewhere today, this crazy bastard is still telling people about his great lawyer who got rid of his ethereal roommate for free. Edit. Hey! It's been awesome checking in and reading your comments today. Made a slow day go quick for me. However, I'm hearing the happy hour bell ringing, so I'm skedaddling. Glad you folks enjoyed this, and and be nice to the lawyers in your life. We're really nice people behind the asshole-flavored coating. Last edit. Also, no more gold, please. If you really are itching to spend that money cause you like this, go ahead and send it to a place like Horizon House, which can help people like my client in the above post, okay? Remember, folks, the mentally ill are actually ill and deserve just as much help as anyone else. Story 2. My husband refused to answer my calls while I was in labor, and my brother played a horrible prank. Now my husband, if furious, I won't cut him off. My husband and I got in a fight prior to my daughter's birth a week ago, when he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. To be clear, this was completely out of the blue, with no wanting or reason. I'm a homebody who works remotely, with no male friends other than my brother. I told him that he was accusing me of infidelity, and he said he just wanted to be sure, and kept bringing it up until I told him, after 3 days of him asking and the stress starting to make me physically ill, that I didn't want to talk to him and left to my brother's house. And I called him while I was gone and tried to work it out, but he refused. After all this, I went home the next day to grab some things while he was at work, and I went into labor. I called him 16 times. Before calling my brother, who called him another half a dozen times himself while on the way to pick me up and then on the way to the hospital. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. I started crowning in the car, and the doctor delivered my daughter in the back of my brother's van because I was too far along to move me, before rushing me in when I kept bleeding. It was horrible. I hated it all. My brother's wife, who is a nurse, even told me she honestly thought I wouldn't make it. I also opted for a hysterectomy as it came to that, or something more dangerous. I only ever wanted one or none, but my husband wants a large family. I'm trying to bond with my daughter, but it's been hard. The point is that during this, while I was returning from surgery, 10 hours after I called, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said, "This is Op's brother. I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it," and turned it off. My husband rushed over and got there when I had just woken up and started shouting until the security forced him out. And then didn't get to see our daughter until the next day because I was mostly asleep, and apparently they needed my signature to allow him back. My Sil thinks it was horribly cruel, but that he deserved it. But my brother stands by his prank and says that he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear he had felt at my side for 10 plus HRs. Whenever he sees my husband, he also keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. And he's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm still healing. My husband is furious that he won't apologize and that I won't make him, and yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I am trying to be empathetic. I know he feels guilty. I've spoken to my therapist, and she says the apathy I'm feeling is likely general and not solely focus on him from lingering shock from the trauma. But didn't say much about the prank. My mill has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank and that I should go no contact with my brother, and now my husband is saying the same. I just don't know what to do. I'm not in a good headspace. It's been hard to be in the same room with my husband, and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. He brought up the paternity once, and I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mom if he's planning on stressing me out even more. I really don't feel myself, and yes, I am taking the likelihood of PPD seriously, and my therapist, who has suggested that it may be PTSD too. However, I just want more opinions because I just don't know. Update. I can't update the old post, but since so many people reached out, I thought I'd make a new one. So, I don't think this will be something we can come back from. I just don't think I'll be able to heal with him, because there is no way he didn't know it was me calling, and he still hasn't told me why he didn't answer. I know I thought I wouldn't decide right away, but I actually don't want to forget how terrible it was waiting on him, thinking he couldn't possibly leave me like that, no matter how angry he was. I took the time to think of that moment before it all went down, and just how grossly betrayed and scared and alone I felt while the contractions were hitting and I was on my knees trying to breathe through the pain while waiting on the phone while it rang, though. And I just don't think there's any coming back for that. I wouldn't want my daughter think it's okay to stay with a man who destroyed her trust that way either. I will be contacting an attorney and will be meeting with them in the coming weeks. We had a prenup, so it hopefully won't be too hellish, I hope. I feel like this situation became even clearer when my friend asked me if I'd still trust him as the one to sign off on my medical papers, and the reaction to that idea was visceral. I wouldn't, and I want him to get off that legality as soon as possible, in fact. There are roommates I had in college would trusted more. I would have never ignored so many calls from him consecutively unless I had told him expressly that I was unavailable at a specific time, and even then. I feel good with my brother and Sil here with me, especially so with her being a nurse and having been there through the birth. It's really helped us bond in a way that we'd never really had time to. I've also finally told my old friends about the baby, and they are alternating to come and help me out for the next little while. None of this even touched the paternity test, but I'll get it for the proceedings, I guess. So I guess he'll get what he wanted. Anyway, I'm safe and well, and my daughter is healthy and happy as a peach and pretty much an angel who is happy to sleep peacefully anywhere and took to the boob with ease, which is such a blessing since everything still hurts. Just making this decision has taken an odd weight off my shoulders, and my SIL has been really helping us bond. Anyway, thank you for letting me write this out. I'm not good at diaries or journals, but writing to people feels different, and it's actually brilliant for the clarity of the situation. Even my therapist said that I seemed clearer and calmer. I might try a diary again, as she suggested. Update 2. Some intro in the case. Popped the paternity test question on me with no reason. We fought for a couple days before I went to my brother's. I was within 2 weeks of my due date. Went into labor, at our house, called him 16 times, Father called him 7 to 9 more. He did not answer. My brother had to pick me up, had a traumatic birth, was kept bleeding, was lucky to conscious enough to sign for myself to get a hysterectomy when things went wrong. Nearly died. He contacted me 10+ hours later. Unapologetic. Has mentioned the paternity test against the week plus since. Still has not told me why he didn't answer. I will now be going forward with divorcing him, as I no longer trust him as a partner. We do have a prenup. Me with my house and my business, and him with money from his family. I do intend on filing for full custody, as I think his reaction, whether spiteful or not, was dangerous, and as a father missing calls. T3+ in a row could be a life and death situation. Is it always worth investigating infidelity in divorces if it's suspected? And do any divorce lawyers find this all seemingly suspicious in their opinions? I will be contacting my lawyer this week. I will likely be getting the paternity test for the divorce.